Did I not call this game to a T? Phillip Enriquez here for Saywhatchalike podcasting. And okay, maybe not exactly the final score, but how the game played out. The national media tried to lie to all of you. That's right. It was trying to convince you that the Dallas and Green Bay matchup would be a battle between the number one rushing offense against the vaunted number one rushing defense of the Green Bay Packers. They tried to tell you that Green Bay actually stood a chance against the Dallas running attack. But if you got a chance to listen to the Cowboys vs. Packers preview from last week that I uploaded here on this channel, you were fairly warned. But to sum it all up one last time, the Green Bay defense previously allowed only 170 yards total on the season. But last Sunday, the Cowboys ran for 191 yards in one single game. And as we all saw on Sunday, the offense held the ball and converted 24 first downs for the game. This Dallas Cowboys offense continues to steamroll opponents. But that's not all, because on the opposite side of the ball, my main concern coming into this game was the Dallas Cowboys' inability to stop the run. But that threat was alleviated last week when I read GM Ted Thompson and head coach Mike McCarthy had both running backs on the roster listed on the injury report, yet failed to call up another running back to be active for game day. I knew this would not allow the Packers offense to exploit the biggest weakness on that Cowboy defense. I knew without a healthy back, whether or not the Green Bay running game was successful or not early in the game, that they could not and would not pound the ball down the Cowboys' throat for 25 plus carries. In fact, it got so bad for Green Bay that the wide receiver, Ty Montgomery, was taking snaps at running back. So, as to be expected, Green Bay began to rely on the arm of Aaron Rodgers, and although he had a better game against the Cowboys than he did in some previous games, for the most part, the Cowboy defense was able to keep Rodgers in the pocket, where he continues to struggle and miss some key throws. And taking a closer look, I noticed that Dallas defense began to call off the blitz, and even in some situations, only rushing 3 men. The defensive ends began crashing out and keeping Rodgers in the pocket, basically all but admitting, hey, we got no pass rush, so let's employ the 8-man coverage schemes, and let's make sure that we keep everything in front of us. And as this season has played out, I've noticed Rod Marinelli has begun to turn to his dime defense more and more, and with a lot of success, may I add, which is very telling about how well the secondary is playing. Now, I have to admit, coming into this season, I was the secondary's biggest critic. I was calling out Mo Clay bust, Brandon used car, and Orlando Scandrick was coming off a serious leg injury that kept him out the entire season of 2015. But man, are they ever proving me wrong. Mo Claiborne has been playing at a Pro Bowl level. Brandon is restored car and hasn't given up any big plays all season long. Another nice surprise is the 6th-round draft pick Anthony Brown, who's taking over the slot for Orlando Scandrick while he gets over his quote-unquote hamstring injuries. We'll get into that later. But Anthony Brown has brought a physical presence to our secondary, and he is an excellent tackler. He recorded 10 tackles in the Green Bay game alone. So, when teams try to run to the edges, it's another added bonus for this Cowboys defense. With that being said, our secondary can still improve, because when Scandrick finally returns after the bye week, our Dallas dime package should be even better, as having both Brown and Scandrick on the roster will allow us to take J.J. Wilcox off the field, as he's often a liability in coverage. And I know what the Stephen A. Smiths are saying out there about their skepticism of this Dallas defense, but this defense, along with the Minnesota Vikings, are the only 2 defenses in the league that are yet to allow both a 100-yard rusher or a 100-yard receiver so far this season. The only 2 teams. This Dallas defense is doing something right. We can no longer call them average. They are a very good defense. And going back to that last stat, again, I'm most impressed by the secondary, as they have kept the likes of A.J. Green, Odell Beckham, Deshaun Jackson, Jordy Nelson, and Alshon Jeffries in check. So if that doesn't impress you, I'm not sure what will. I predicted this game to be a lot closer than it was. But I must admit, I'm changing my tune. Dak Prescott looks impressive, and I'd have a hard time pulling him out for Tony Romo, even when Romo's healthy. Especially if Dak gets us another division win against Philadelphia after the bye. There's no way I put Romo in for that Cleveland game. And that, of course, is not a knock on Romo, who I believe to be a great quarterback. But Dak Prescott is looking like not just the future, but the present of this Dallas Cowboys team. In fact, I can't hold back my excitedness anymore. I can't hold it back any longer, guys. I gotta tell you, I would never say this before. You guys know. All the time, Cowboys fans would always try to convince me, we're going back to the 90s style. We're just like the 90s. We'll never be like the 90s, I used to say. The 90s were the 90s. As great as they were, my favorite teams of all time. The most dominant teams of all time, in my opinion. But we'll never be like that, I would say. You know, sometimes, we had the likes of Julius Jones and Marion Barber, but they're not quite Emmitt Smith. We had Antonio Bryant for a few years. We had T.O., and people would try to say, there's the next Michael Irvin. And, Tony Romo, hey, he's like the next Aikman. But I've always thought of Tony Romo more like a Brett Favre type. But after watching Dak Prescott play, wow, what does he remind me of? He reminds me of a quarterback that took care of the ball, limited turnovers, played well in the big games, made all the throws he had to make, no matter how little or how big. He got the job done. He wasn't concerned about his numbers. He was concerned about winning and leading the team. And that reminds me of Troy Aikman. But in short, Cowboys Nation, we are riding a wave of momentum that's being led by two rookies that have completely changed the atmosphere in the locker room. It's more of a college atmosphere than a professional atmosphere, where it's the next man up mentality. If somebody goes down, that person steps up to the plate and they play their game plan. They play the way they play. And that's it. And they're having fun doing it. I love seeing this team playing the way they are with the energy and the camaraderie that they're playing it with. That gives me confidence. But hold on, Dallas Cowboys fans. I know we're excited, but we're not quite Super Bowl material yet. We have a few bumps. We have a few warts. Namely, biggest one being the pass rush. The pass rush has been non-existent minus that Cincinnati game. But if we can improve upon that, get ready to call yourself a serious Super Bowl contender for this 2016 season. I'll see you next time on Say What You Like podcast.